Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new World of Warships gameplay today on our channel. In this episode we'll be featuring our favourite ship in the game, the Tier 10 American destroyer known as the Gearing, in an Epicentre match on the map Tears Desert. The focus of today's gameplay is going to be on how we can use the Gearing to contest, control and defend the central position on the map, and therefore in an Epicentre game mode. We're going to start off by making our way towards the centre, whereby we're going to outline one of the key weaknesses of the ship straight away, and that is its limited top speed of 36 knots. We could run the speed flag, but I prefer not to run flags of that type, whereby they buff the overall statistics of the ship, and I prefer to use base statistics. And we're not running the speed boost consumable, because we've gone for the defensive AA consumable, and we'll see how we're going to use that later on. So therefore we are reliant on our team in pushing towards the centre in terms of our team's destroyers and light cruisers early on to prevent the enemy team if they decide to rush the middle in capturing it outright, at which point the emphasis will go on our team to be on the offensive rather than our intention of putting the enemy team to go on the offensive. Now as we make our way in, let's consider the fact that whilst we're going towards the objective, I'm trying to think of a number of variables. The first one, how quickly are the rings being captured by the enemy team? We see they've already got one ship into the outer ring at least. When the second innermost ring is being captured, however, I identify very quickly, due to the rate at which it's being captured, there must be at least 2 enemy destroyers making their way towards the middle. As we're going to see, it's going to be captured a lot faster than a single destroyer would. And then this logic carries through to the third ring. Making our way in, we can see how our limited speed is really holding us back. We've only just hit the outermost ring, and we can see the rate of the second ring being captured has confirmed our faults already. By the time we're about to get towards the second innermost ring, we're going to see that the central ring is being captured by the enemy team, and our destroyers have drifted wide of going towards the centre, which is fair enough. The second thing I'm considering is, can I beat all 4 of the enemy destroyers in a 1 versus 1? Well, they've got 2 Shimikazes, 1 Fletcher and 1 Gearing. The Fletcher and the Gearing will match me for DPM very well. The Shimikazes will be reliant on their torpedoes and gradual DPM. I have the superior DPM in that regard with my 2.4 second reload, so long as I engage my foes at closer ranges, i.e. below 7 km, because of the low muzzle velocity of 792 meters per second on my shells and the rainbow-like shell arcs as we go further and further away. So I'm confident in a 1 versus 1 I can beat my opposition. Unfortunately for us, our friendly Minotaur has put themselves into the central ring to prevent it from being captured. I'm also, the third item I'm thinking about is where's the enemy's Dimitri Donskoy with that 11.8 km radar, because if that gets too close, we've got issues. More on that in a bit. For the time being, however, we briefly spotted the enemy Shimikaze, who's now automatically gone to smoke, and we should note that the detectability by sea of the Gearing is the same as that of the Shimikaze, maximum, from what I remember, 5.9 km, and by air for the Gearing it's 3.5 km. We throw torpedoes, both of our quintuple set, towards the left-hand edge of the smoke screen set up by the Shimikaze. That's not because I'm worried about the smoke screen, although I'm also anticipating a potential juking whereby the Shimikaze would have reversed. I'm more interested in that opening in the centre of our screen into the objective, whereby any enemy ships that decide to rush through there will be hit by those torpedoes. And in the meantime, I have to consider that our friendly Shimikaze down in the southwest is torpedoing those enemy ships that are rotating towards the southwest, so we want to provide torpedo coverage across the map. On top of that, because I know the Donskoy is so far away and they can't use their radar effectively against me if they decide to randomly pop it, we have to consider the variables, I can push towards the Shimikaze smoke. I'm keeping an angle so that way I can turn in towards it or turn away from it with my 3.3 second rudder shift if torpedoes appear or enemy ships are spotted. And I drift into the smoke now to avoid being detected by the enemy Azumo, and also to head towards the southeastern corner of the central ring to try and spot what's there, because there's still enemy destroyers here, we know that. Drifting into the smoke, we resist the urge to open fire on the Azumo, even though they're displaying a very nice broadside for our armour piercing to go through, with its maximum 2100 HP of damage, our high explosives maximum being 1800 with a 5% fire chance. And coming out the Shimikaze smoke, having gone towards the centre, we spot both the Fletcher and the Shimikaze. Now we automatically target the Fletcher because they're the more powerful DPM target, but on top of that, they haven't been resetting the capture points they've got until we hit them. And as they were stationary and went to their smoke, it means that we had the opportunity to fire on them despite being undetected in their smoke for a brief while whilst they got themselves up to speed. But the issue is this is now a effectively 2 versus 3 situation, or at least we've got the 3 enemy destroyers focusing on us and it looks as though 1 enemy cruiser is also shooting at us. So that's why we decided to go to our smoke there in order to reset the balance of the situation, whereby we do not want to lose all of our 19,400 health until we have to sacrifice it. In the meantime, the Fletcher has thrown torpedoes towards our smoke, but because we anticipated that coming, we're now going to be sailing away and dodging those torpedoes as a result, and also spotting them for our friendly Kagero, so they can react in time. While torpedoes reloaded, we decided to throw them towards the smoke set up by at least one of the two Shimokazes. They might have both thrown up their smoke there in a panic, we don't know. And our Kagero seems pretty content to sit in their smoke. So the situation has been neutralised. For the time being, that is. What we have to consider now is how are the bigger players going to come into this match. It looks as though our friendly Missouri is getting ready to contest the centre using their radar set. But we also don't know about the enemy's Grosser Kurfürst, which could come in towards the centre using its Hydro, and its rather brawly nature. This widespread of torpedoes has most likely come from one of the two Shimokazes, and looking over at our own torpedoes with their 16.5 km range and 66 knot top speed, and maximum damage of 17,900, we can see that the Shimokaze is going to take the rightmost one and lose a lot of health. A nice 11,000 wiped off of them with a single torpedo, that'll help us later on. In the meantime, we look towards the other Shimokaze, which was spotted by our Missouri's radar set. We're holding fire very briefly to make sure there's going to be no major repercussions, i.e. anyone big who can focus us, and then we'll open fire. But what we also have to consider is that this range to get a successive number of hits with multiple salvos is going to be difficult, which is why we're using our 2.4 second reload to throw a lot of damage out and hopefully score some of it. If not, it doesn't matter, we push the Shimokaze away. The unfortunate fact of us running advanced firing training is we put our spotting when firing distance out to 13.3 kilometers, but the advanced firing training is for our anti-aircraft batteries rather than anything else. More on that again later. But now while the big players has arrived, the Grosser Kurfürst, now we know that this guy is trying to contest the centre and trying to prevent our Missouri from taking the centre. So those two are going to want to go at it like mad. Our logic is we're going to turn the table of that fight to our advantage, or at least make sure our Missouri is traded for the Kurfürst. We don't want the Kurfürst to win. Therefore, we're going to be on hand, and so are the enemy destroyers in supporting their battleship. The nice effect of the trade would be we would be trading a tier 9 battleship for a tier 10. That's the worst case scenario of the trade. We'd want the Missouri to live. Now we can't use our torpedoes because the Missouri is going forward, and they use their radar up in order to spot the destroyers earlier on. I asked just to check whether they had radar available, so I have to focus my attention on the Kurfürst. But look at how the two ships are lined up against each other. They're going broadside to broadside, which means at this range I can bring my armour pierce into effect. I'm also noting how long it's going to take before my smoke gets back in case the Missouri gets deleted rapidly, because then I can go to smoke and shell the Kurfürst from the concealment of my smoke, with their Hydro probably not having long left on it if they've been using it already. Torpedoes are coming in, we're also keeping an eye on those in case they drift towards us. That's why we zoomed out there very briefly to make sure we weren't on the direct line of them. We can see how our armour piercing is doing a good amount of damage, whereby we're scoring 1,000 to 2,000 damage salvos. This means the fight is still in the balance, and over time, what it enables us to do is get rid of one of the most important assets on the enemy team, i.e. this battleship. Now we are being spotted in the Hydro despite our smoke screen, but once that Kurfürst is gone, which they're about to be, that spotting stops, and there we go. Now we lost our Missouri unfortunately, but effectively that is a positive trade in my opinion, because we lost a lower tier battleship for a higher tier one, both of them having powerful utilities, but the tier 10 German battleship that was taken out I personally feel has the greater net value in this battle. I may be wrong, everyone's entitled to their opinion. But now, with the centre in our grasp, we need to turn on the defensive, so I'm going to change my playstyle now and be much more conservative. I need to shut down avenues of approach for the enemy team, starting with the one that North Carolina is trying to look at. Now I'm expecting none of those torpedoes to hit. If one hits, that's great. I just want the North Carolina to drift southwestwards rather than stay south of the capture point. Well, southeastwards at the moment. In the meantime, what I'm also looking at is our Minotaur to see whether they spot anything, but unfortunately they get wiped out by the enemy Iowa. We need to stay concealed, however, because there's a large number of enemy ships that do have their guns pointed towards the centre because of the fracas that happened earlier with the battleships going head to head, which is why we're being so quiet. We're also attempting to spot any torpedoes coming from the Shimokaze based over on the eastern side of the map, i.e. the enemy one. And looking at our own torpedoes as well as we dodge another set of widespreads, let's see how they do. 2 torpedo hits, so that means we probably got at least 20,000 damage on that North Carolina, and we forced them to use their damage control consumable. That's nice. Unfortunately we won't be able to exploit the 2 floods we caused, but that's the way it is. So as a result now, what we know is that North Carolina is probably thinking to themselves, I don't want to come through the southeastern approach or the southern approach, I want to go southwest with the rest of my teammates. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to force the enemy team to drift one way. And of course, when the enemy team see that their North Carolina took a load of torpedoes, they're probably thinking as well, God, I don't want to go that way because there's a threat of a destroyer with torpedoes waiting there. Now we are spotted briefly here, and it's the Shimakaze coming back to contest the centre, and we can see how the mindset of the enemy team now needing to be on the offensive is going to cost the Shimakaze its life, because it comes into the centre unprepared for our defensive presence. And that means we very quickly wipe them out of the game for our second kill, and there's only one enemy destroyer left, and it's the other Shimakaze. So the torpedo threat on the enemy team is being taken away rather rapidly. In the meantime, I'm also noting the enemy Zao here. Now, I'm noting that they're not pushing the centre. They were just edging their way in towards it. They fire a good salvo at us. If you're wondering why I put the fire out before being unspotted, the logic being that I could afford for the Zao to set me on fire if needs be, because it'd only be another 20 seconds effectively before I'd have to put the fire out once again, so I'm not too worried. I'd rather lose a little bit of health, but have put out the issues that were with the ship beforehand. Looking across, we've got our torpedoes reloaded, but what we have to consider now is the fact that we were spotted. So as a result, the enemy team are anticipating gearing torpedoes are probably on their way once again. So that's why I'm delaying the next set of torpedoes coming out, because I want the enemy team to think, well, perhaps the gearing is looking somewhere else. Perhaps they're trying to focus their torpedoes somewhere completely different. I want to catch the enemy by surprise. And by being a little bit less predictable as a result, perhaps I can maximise my torpedo damage. I scored 2 more hits. Now we're focusing towards the central avenue on our screen. Reason being, it looks as though the enemy North Carolina and the Dmitry Donskoy are drifting this way. It also appears that the enemy Iowa is leading a charge round through this pass, and they seem to be caught between a rock a hard place and our friendly battleships. Now here, with the Iowa being isolated, our smoke being available, and the Iowa giving us a very nice broadside, we can afford to once again bring our armour pierce into play and just rip into the side of their ship, going for that side armour and the superstructure, preferably the superstructure where possible. And as we'll see, the Iowa briefly beaches, and we're able to get approximately 1,000 to 2,000 damage salvos off every time. Albeit when they get behind the hill, we will not be able to arc our shells over the hill because the Iowa is too close. Again, we can see the net effects of our rainbow shell arcs coming in handy. We do take a hit from some estimated fire, most likely from one of the enemy cruisers down south of us. And here as the Iowa makes their way behind the landmass, we note that they're carrying too much speed to be able to sit behind the main rock. So what we start to do is move forward so we can shoot over the right-hand rock, anticipating their forward motion. Our team are also ripping into the Iowa very nicely, and they're taken out the game by a friendly Mogami. Again, more torpedoes coming, so what that tells us straight away is the Shimakaze, which was in the western quadrant, the eastern quadrant of the map, mixing up my compass directions here, is rotating southwards towards the southwestern corner of the map, because those torpedoes were angled coming from southeast compared to their previous position on the minimap. So we're using that logic to dictate that they're probably coming to support their fleet. In the meantime then, we're now going to rotate eastwards to confuse the enemy team as to where we are. Because the last thing they'll notice, a smoke screen was spotted on the western side of the central ring, and we would therefore be making our way westwards towards our teammates. It also means we're providing extra vision across the map, because at the end of the day, the Shimakaze and the enemy team may decide to keep rotating back towards the east and throwing torpedoes across, which means that our team would be exposed to a torpedo wall, but we would spot that torpedo wall effectively. In the meantime, what we're also noting here is that the balance is tipping more in the enemy's favour. It looks as though our team, and this is not a judgment of our teammates, this is what I'm thinking right now, it looks as though our team still think that there's a need to be on the offensive, or at least be out of position for an effective defence. Which is why we've made our way back to this side so that way we can cover off the attack avenues once more. We're hoping to find that Shimakaze wanting to take on the central objective. We throw our torpedoes down towards the southwestern entry avenue into the central objective once again, trying to catch the North Carolina off guard. The reason being they seem to be drifting in towards that approach avenue, and we want to clip them with a torpedo wherever possible. We see torpedoes coming out, and that confirms to us that the Shimakaze is in the southwestern quadrant of the map now, supporting their teammates. And of course we had that smoke screen to consider, but that may have come, or be a remnant smoke screen from earlier. So we have to use the torpedo logic there. Torpedoes going in, we can see that 2 of them are going to hit the mark, doing another load of damage to that North Carolina. Effectively 26,000 health off of it, it's now down to a critical state. But we're going to carry on going eastwards here to set up a two-sided engagement on the North Carolina, because our friendly North Carolina is aiming at the enemy North Carolina, which means that the enemy North Carolina has to turn its armour towards the bigger threat. Then off to what is effectively its eastern side, we're sitting there, or its starboard side from the perspective of the captain of that ship. We can start raining in the armour piercing, gradually ramping up the damage here. A nice meaty 2,300 damage salvo there, followed by another 2,000 damage salvo. And that puts the North Carolina out of the game. We're in a 2 versus 3 now, and the reason we use our defensive AA here is to get rid of that spotter plane. And that's why I picked defensive AA on the ship, because I can get rid of spotter planes very quickly. Or catapult fighters if you want to use the actual terminology. With that plane gone, I now can do what I want to do in the centre, but the fact I was briefly detected there also indicates that the Shimakaze may have been trying to probe into the second innermost ring. Well, it may have been a delayed anti-spotting result, i.e. server delay. But I'm going to assume that it's actually the Shimakaze trying to probe the second innermost ring. But looking over very briefly to the situation, what I'm anticipating now is perhaps our North Carolina's going to go down in a minute because they've got a 3 versus 1 scenario, so I'm getting ready for the 1 versus 3. To do so, I need to get rid of that Don squad as quickly as possible, and what I'm noticing is they're drifting towards this avenue in the centre of our screen very rapidly to set up their 11.8 kilometre radar to spot us. So we're throwing our torpedoes that way. The Izumo is coming into the objective but has exposed their broadside to us, so we're going to go to armour piercing. And with them only having 4,000 health, we can tear that to pieces. And that fire is also going to drain some health out of them very quickly. So say goodbye to that Izumo because it's now gone. Another kill. And in the meantime, let's look over our torpedoes. And there's the Donskoi's high explosive from their 180mm cannon. We anticipated that they'd come across. They're probably getting ready to toss up the radar, turning full broadside so they can bring all 4 of their triple batteries to bear. But they probably didn't anticipate that we already knew they were going to plan to do that, or we outfought them here, and they're drifting right into a nice torpedo. They're gone, and now it's a 1 versus 1 against a Shimakaze, who we know has to be off to the western side of the map. And if they want to get into the centre, we have full control here, because we know they've got to be in the outermost ring right now, and looking at the catch point indicator at the bottom of our screen, very shortly they're going to drift into the second innermost ring, which tells us they're coming this way, let's get ready for them. And in the DPM war and the spotting war, we know we're equal in terms of spotting. We've got the greater DPM, so this should be a cakewalk because their health last time was less than ours. We're angled as well, so that way if they did send all their torpedoes towards us, we're ready to dodge them, i.e. turn in towards them and make sure they don't hit, with our 3.3 second rudder shift coming in handy. And we're just waiting now for the eventual destroyer to appear, because if they want to win, they've got to take us head on. And that's the wonderful thing about having that central map control from the start. We spot the Shimakaze, and the rest, to get our Kraken, is history. A thoroughly enjoyable match from our own perspective, and a rather rewarding one. We can see that we picked up 2 heroic achievements for our efforts. The first, Confederate, for damaging at least 6 enemy ships, whereby the damage caused to each of these ships must exceed 20% of a normal health pool, and the one that everybody wants, the Kraken Unleashed, for in a single battle, destroying 5 or more enemy ships. Our total damage output in the end was 153,790 HP. Looking at the team scores, we can see that we topped our team in terms of base experience earned, picking up 2,876. Now by no means do I feel that I personally carried the team to victory. If anything, I played with a different perspective to a number of my colleagues, whereby I focused on taking the centre and then holding it, putting the onus on the enemy team to go on the offensive and allowing our team the ability to go on the defensive if wanted. Meanwhile, my teammates played with the idea of engaging enemy team head to head down the western sides of the map and through the centre, and I would like to give credit to my team in holding up and doing a lot of damage to the enemy's fleet, particularly our North Carolina towards the end, and on top of that our Missouri, who pushed into the centre and took on the Grosser Kurfürst head to head and did a lot of damage to them and allowed us to achieve a trade. If anything, one criticism I have of myself in this gameplay is that I was very selfish. All of my smokes benefited me and me alone, at least from what I saw. As a result, I personally thought I could have perhaps used my smoke to shield some of my teammates or their approaches across the map and kept some other ships alive to the end of the game, but that was not meant to be this time. Looking at our detailed report, we have one key item to note here in the team play category, and that is the number of torpedoes we spotted. Whilst it could be considered a low number of 32, those are 32 torpedoes that may have not hit their target, and these were typically torpedoes coming from the enemy shimikazes crossing the centre of the map. My point is, by going into the centre and providing vision, we're not only providing vision to our team in terms of enemy ships contesting the centre, but also any armament that goes across the centre, and we may help keep ships alive for a lot longer as a result. And finally, coming on to our credits and experience earned, we can see that after additions and deductions, we walked away with 612,354 silver credits and 10,785 commander experience. To conclude, hopefully today we have emphasised the value of contesting the central ring of an Epicentre game type early on in a given match, whereby destroyers such as the Gearing are very effective in doing so. By taking control of the central ring over the course of the given game, you effectively inherit greater visibility and map control, whether on an individual level or on a team basis. And as we saw at the end of this match in the 1 versus 3 scenario, we used the map control and the intelligence that provided in order to shut down the individual approaches of our 3 opponents, whereby in the end they had no options available to them other than certain death, and we ended up being the last man standing. And so I've been TX141, and if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future World of Warships videos on my channel. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and fair seas.